With Muzan Kibutsuji being the main villain of Demon Slayer, I thought it would be somewhat appropriate to see what vampires Tanjiro could defeat. And so of course the most iconic vampire in anime is definitely Dio Brando. We'll be going over the low and high balls for parts 1 and 3, but thankfully unlike Shigi vs Mahito, I don't need to do any cross-verse assumptions due to the properties of Nichiren swords being close to sunlight, which is Dio's biggest weakness. Oh, and if you were here for the original JoJo's vids, you a real one. Let's go! Dio Brando is unquestionably the height of JoJo's Part 1. Even with numerous high-tier Hamon masters assisting him and gaining all of William Zappelli's Hamon, Jonathan struggled immensely to defeat Dio, which earns Dio all of Part 1's scaling, including several consistent building and large building level calcs. But most impressive is naturally his own Space Ripper Stingy Eyes, which in the anime have dispersed clouds, at what has been calced to be multi-city block or city level, depending on low or high balling. However, this is actually his second best ability, as he has a unique ability unofficially called Vaporization Freeze, which he does by reducing his body temperature below freezing and then by touching his opponent, distributes the heat between them which instantly freezes their body. Now obviously this isn't like a no limits thing, but considering the body manipulation Hamon users have, this does seem like a way to bypass durability. Dio also does have insane regeneration like demons, able to heal from being split in two, beheaded, and in the anime almost completely incinerated to ash. However, more than his vampiric abilities, his speed is actually his most valuable asset in a cross-verse battle. As we know, Hamon ripples are directly compared to sunlight, which would be easy to dismiss if it weren't for the Bruford fight, in which Jojo directly states that Bruford was able to dodge the turquoise blue overdrive.
I can't believe Bluford was able to dodge that blast of Hamon. He moved so fast underwater. He was all a blur. My overdrive barely glanced off his forehead.
Now he was tagged, but considering Jojo also right before this says that water is a natural conductor of Hamon, it would mean he avoided the brunt of overdrive, which would show relativity in speed, making Bruford, and by extension Dio, relativistic to light speeds. But unfortunately later JoJo's has extremely consistent light speed scaling, from Polnareff performing a light speed feat to databooks literally describing Jotaro as faster than light. We also know Star Platinum is relative to Silver Chariot, and that Dio was considered weaker than his Part 1 self until drinking Joseph's blood, and could fight on par with Jotaro and defeat Polnareff. Not to mention the rationalist argument that people who fight with stands still have to be able to at least somewhat keep up with their stands to order them around and use them, which strengthens the idea of Part 1 Dio being kinda fast. Tanjiro is an insane prodigy in the world of Demon Slayer, displaying 1 in dozens potential as the only of Urukadaki's children to slay the hand demon, using 3 different breathing styles and actually managing to use 2 of them at the same time on multiple occasions, awakening a Demon Slayer mark, wielding a bright red Nichiren sword with Nezuko's help, and despite only being a Demon Slayer for roughly a year, grew to not only be Hashira level but one of the strongest Demon Slayers in all of history. Power is a Demon Slayer's strong suit, but there are some feats we can upscale from for the top tier, such as a small town level explosion during the entertainment district, Zohakuten's wooden dragon, which is easily large building level eyeballing, and Muzan creating a small earthquake, which has been calced to being small city level. While this was done by nerfed Muzan, it is only nerfed Muzan Tanjiro would scale to, except for Demon King Tanjiro, who was stated to be the strongest demon in history. Considering he could be held down by like random humans, Nezuko's, and a bunch of like randoms, I doubt the statement a little bit, but it doesn't matter much for this video considering that Tanjiro did not use a sword in that state, which is what we should go over now. Tanjiro wields Yorichi's Nichiren sword, a sword forged from stones found atop mountains bathed in sunlight all year long, granting them the passive ability to stop demon regeneration via re-emitted solar energy. When intense pressure, friction, or heat are applied to one, the sword can glow bright red, allowing them to altogether halt regeneration on demons that can regenerate their heads, meaning even being stabbed or slashed anywhere would halt vampiric regeneration, instead of just bypassing it during the act of cutting. While Tanjiro does usually carry Nezuko around as standard equipment, during the time he displays his best feats in scaling, she was separated and turned into human, so we won't be going over her here. The last thing to figure out for Tanjiro is speed, which will vary wildly depending on whether or not you calc stack. The best direct speed feat I could see from a top tier would either be Tanjiro dodging Hantengu's lightning, or Kokishibo blitzing Genya's shotgun bullets and cutting his hand off before he could react. Lightning is roughly Mach 364, which when adding in the Demon Slayer mark which has been stated as a 100 times multiplier and confirmed a speed boost as well, would get us to 3600 400 Mach, on top of which Tanjiro can stack the transparent world, which makes the user faster, the degree to which is unknown. All we know is that Tanjiro went from losing to winning with it in his battle against Akaza, but Akaza immediately started adapting to him and turned it equal again, which Kokushibo referred to as new heights. The multiplier is extremely vague and seems to be more of a Sharingan speed boost, but if we want to be nice and say it's a few times stronger, we can use 10 to get us to 364,000 Mach. He would be slower but not completely incapable of fighting Dio. This is anime only and an extraordinarily generous highball. So let's go over another feat. A different route would be Kokushibo, who blitzed shotgun fire while cutting someone's hand off, which, considering this is whole body movement and a complex action, is at least comparable to that Mach-E calc I've heard at Mach 30 or so, when considering this is base Kokushibo and that he was suppressing himself to the Demon Slayer's bases. We can multiply for the Demon Slayer mark, which gets us 300 Mach, and then the transparent world to Mach 3000, as a much more reasonable ballpark, in which this route is backed up as we know Rengoku could dodge the lower two Hyro's bullets in Rengoku Gaiden. That was a whole lot of yapping, so let's simplify a bit. Reasonably, Tanjiro is bare minimum massive hypersonic, but can be relativistic if you are extraordinarily nice to Tanjiro and use the anime. While Tanjiro stands a much better chance than I thought going into this match, he unfortunately does not seem to have a good answer to Vaporization Freeze. We saw Jonathan conducting Hamon into Bruford's sword still got frozen by Dio, which is literally the entire way Tanjiro fights. Considering Dio has the better strength showing if we use the anime, which we have to do to get Tanjiro to being similar in speed, it just means he would freeze Tanjiro's sword and then kill him, either by freezing his body or blasting him with the Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. It's kind of unfortunate, but Dio is just stronger and faster, going with the more consistent showings from Tanjiro, and has a hex Tanjiro can't overcome. This is where people would say that sun breathing could be conducted through the frozen sword with literal heat. However, volume extras and Demon Slayer confirm that the sword effects are mirages, and that they are simply so masterful others hallucinate and see and feel them. This means Tanjiro loses this round. Next would be part 3, where things get slightly interesting. We know Dio considers himself weaker in Jonathan's body with the world, and can't use his vampiric abilities, only stating he's at his strongest after drinking Joseph's blood. This means Tanjiro now likely outmatches Dio physically, but worse for Tanjiro, Dio now has the ability to stop time, an infamously overpowered ability. And yes, unfortunately for Beefstick Tanjiro, he will never land an attack on this Dio, and will just get haxed. But for what it's worth, if Dio didn't have hacks, Tanjiro does have the power and speed to decapitate him, which I thought wouldn't be possible going into this video. So this actually did catch me off guard. If you disagree, tell me why. And if you have your own video on the topic, tell me so I can react to it on stream. Like Dio said, "Get back!"